Millennial Grey, also called Millennial Grey Core, Corporate Grey, or just the modern adaptation of minimalism, represents a shift in interior and exterior design trends that many argue is a step firmly in the wrong direction.
There's a millennial grey looking restaurant, so that makes a cute restaurant.
Despite this, it seems to be omnipresent, and as such this bland aesthetic is now held in the same regard as live, laugh, love signs, or the far too common corporate vector art seen everywhere online. It is described as Millennial Grey Core because many millennials seem to have it in their homes. But why is this generic look so common if it's considered devoid of personality? For starters, the term Millennial Grey arguably culminates in an obvious ploy from traditional and citizen media interested in generating clickbait outrage to divide millennials and other generations. It's a simple way to get views by inciting anger, so it's worth keeping this criticism in mind when referring to the concept. And it's worth noting that only a few years ago social media went nuts covering millennial pink, and instead of being associated with a grey look, every millennial was stereotyped as living with colourful tones. As it would turn out, plenty of other age demographics live with this aesthetic, but it seems to be symptomatic of a shift in the early 2000s and not because those who have it are inherently boring. It's a little more complicated than that. Millennial grey is a product of many cultural transferences, including minimalism going mainstream, as well as house flipping and corporate interests utilising the look to scrub away personality to make assimilation easier. So let's take a brief dive into the world of mainstream design aesthetics and how they led to millennial grey. During the late 90s to early 2000s, the world of design saw a change from 70s to 80s brown into a world of extreme colour and presence. Sure, there were some repressed tones in the 90s grunge scene, but these were quickly outpaced by a mainstream extreme choice. Naturally, this explosion in colour eventually gave way to its inverse, an obsession with and adaptation of minimalism, a movement that began in the late 50s but evolved over the years. Suddenly, it became very cool to have an extremely stripped back area consisting only of neutral tones. Grey marble, grey vinyl planks, and grey painted walls were common, which resulted in many restaurants and cafes taking on the look in order to appear trendy. However, whilst this was a cool and unique look for a while, different from the decades that preceded it, it now appears as outdated and uninspired as wonderfully colourful interiors did in the early 2000s. As such, this mainstream adaptation of minimalism is now turning back into cozier looks in more colourful scenes, otherwise known as maximalism, which we will cover later in this video. However, an issue that continues to plague minimalism is its vague interpretation. The whole concept is meant to revolve around a less is more ideal, but what happens when the less becomes too much? The evolution of a minimalist look to a boring grey aesthetic occurred when companies realised filling a room with bland, neutral tones allows anyone to feel familiar with it, which is why so many hotel rooms, Airbnbs, and corporate business offices have this look boxed up in a cookie-cutter format. It's the same as those cubic grey-looking buildings that have sprung up everywhere as cheap new houses. They too were once considered cool and chic, but are now extremely uninspired as they appear the same as everywhere else. It became easy to access furniture in this grey aesthetic too, as Kmart, Target, and IKEA began selling items following the trend, and as such, office spaces have embraced these mass-produced items. This means that once it became readily observable in many corporate settings as well as people's homes, it very quickly became uncool and associated with cheap company purchases. This joins mass-produced prints that really dip into the whole hotel core look, wherein they just have next to zero personality but are created in order to give some colour to an otherwise completely grey dwelling. Consequently, it is extremely common for house flippers to insert this look, as the lack of crazy colours or unique vibes allows potential homebuyers to apply their own ideas on what is basically a blank canvas, ensuring a quicker sell. You may have noticed the corporate association with minimalism ties into McDonald's and other fast food chains changing from colourful to grey. Some claim this is an aesthetic decision to make eating in less pleasant so that people leave quicker, thus more food can be served faster. However, this theory is unlikely as McDonald's changed to suit cafe trends of the past, attempting to fit in with the rest of what was considered upscaled cafe culture with soft lighting, wood paneling, and a neutral feel. McDonald's actually called it the Forever Young redesign, launched in 2006, and this is a choice that has spread to almost all fast food restaurants. During the early 2000s, it was a hugely different choice to the wilder aspects of their previous design ethos, making Forever Young feel new and exciting. Now, it just feels bland and devoid of personality, as has been noted extensively by many online spaces. It's no coincidence this began to occur when McDonald's introduced the McCafe in Australia in 1993, which removed many of the unique colours of the established restaurants and led to a far more neutral rebranding. The first McCafe to open in the US would do so in 2001 and would copy this millennial grey core aesthetic. Unfortunately, this design aesthetic just kept going and never stopped, and now we're left with an outdated look culminating in boring boxy architecture. Surely the restaurant is due for an updated visage soon. Naturally, many argue these grey colours and design choices are eradicating what makes so many physical spaces special in the the first place. If a house flipper were to create a blank canvas on an otherwise detailed home, they may be inclined to remove moldings, trims, or even hardwood floors that would otherwise have given the place a unique and ultimately human feel. Historical identity can be absolutely erased, especially in neighborhoods where all houses are renovated to have this grey boxy look. It's a bit like that moment in American Psycho when Patrick Bateman takes his escorts to Paul Allen's apartment and they immediately feel more at home there instead of his trendy monochrome interior. This video of the bathroom in a Mexican restaurant is again a prime example of this phenomenon. You get a fantastic and colourful area that makes customers feel happy and interested, and then walking into the bathroom feels like a completely different experience. It's like being transported into a corporate office, a hotel toilet, or a house designed specifically to sell. Due to all this pushback, it would seem extremely colourful and almost kitsch aesthetics are coming back in. Think a mishmash of adaptations of previous decades. Maximalism comes from a need to embrace humanity and the garish flaws that come with it. It's not about accumulating things for the sake of consumerism, it's about rebelling against boring neutral tones and demonstrating colour and fun. Some even call it Grand Millennial, as a direct counter to Millennial Grey, evoking a style embraced initially by millennials in their late 20s and 30s that is now being pushed across all demographics, including Gen Z. As such, eventually maximalism will be kitsch again, and minimalistic greycore will undoubtedly return. Of course, it is still possible to maintain a minimalist look without completely eradicating the personality of a place, but this isn't the direction companies or house flippers seem to want to take. Just put in some colour for warmth instead of going all in on the grey tones, and don't completely destroy the historical characteristics a home might already possess. Essentially, Millennial Grey remains a term generated to incite clickbait, as is Millennial Pink and Millennial Maximalism, as well as give a label to the weird trend wherein house flippers and companies remove all the aspects of a home or business that make it unique and replace it with whatever is cheap and stylish at the time. It's not as if grey can't be utilised in a manner that enhances interior design, it just gets weird when absolutely all personality is eradicated in favour of different shades of one colour. This arguably only diminishes comfortably human aspects, which is why there is so much pushback against stylistic changes regarding McDonald's and consequently increasing love for maximalism. See you next time on Lessons in Internet Culture.